Is prosperity just material wealth? Or is it something more than that? Can we put a price on our health? On progress or opportunity? Can we navigate a path to success in an ever-changing landscape? And still take care of the important things? The art of prosperity lies in developing successful businesses that contribute to growth and healthier, more sustainable economies. Through insight, ethics, and education, chartered accountants help businesses to see the bigger picture and ensure what really matters is given the value it deserves.
Tēnā rā tātou, ka mihi atu ki te ro o te tāpu. Ki a koe Dr. Lance O'Sullivan, ki a koe Dame Diane Robertson, ki a koe Professor Robert McCulloch, ki a koe Hinarangi Romati, ki a koe Rick Ellis. Huri noa ki a tātou katoa e manaki ai tēnei kaupapa, te tuari I ngā rawa ki tūtoki ai te katoa. E te ti, e te tā, tēnā rā tātou. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the launch of our paper, The Quest for Prosperity: How Can New Zealand Keep Living Standards Rising for All? We're excited and privileged to have so many of you involved in this thought leadership discussion. We have over 1,500 people joining us today, either in the room here in Auckland or via webcast across New Zealand. A special welcome to the more than 1,200 of you who are with us on the webcast. My name is Peter Vile. I've been the New Zealand country head for Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand since April. I'm delighted to be hosting tonight's event. I'm honoured and humbled to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Dr. Lance O'Sullivan, and our distinguished panellists, Dame Diane Robertson, Professor Robert McCulloch, and Hinarangi Romati, FCA. We've invited our four guests to join us this evening because of their fierce reputations for integrity and their commitment to better outcomes for our communities. I'm sure we'll be in for a free and frank debate. I'll introduce Lance and our panellists in a bit more detail in a few minutes. I'd also like to welcome our new CEO, Rick Ellis, who's here at the front with the panellists, who joined us earlier this month. We are delighted Rick could join us here from Sydney. Please take the opportunity to meet Rick when we have drinks and nibbles afterwards, or from 7 o'clock. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of our past president and life member, Peter Hayes, our regional councillors and members of the Auckland local leadership team. Before we get going, I have to do those housekeeping notes, which are all fairly self-evident, but we do need to go through them. So we encourage all of you, both at the venue and on the webcast, to share your views, questions and photos of the event using #FutureInc through all social media platforms. If you're on the webcast and you want to ask a question, you'll find an instant messenger text box where you can send through your questions to our panel for the Q&A session, which will take place later on. For those of you in the room, if there's an emergency, an alarm will sound. Please follow instructions from the venue staff and go out the nearest exit and assemble out the front here in the Karanga Plaza. Fire exits are illuminated with green signs. This is a non-smoking venue, obviously. If you need to smoke, you can do that outside. If you require first aid assistance, then please see one of the venue staff in the first instance or visit the registration desks. There are bathrooms on each level and located near the escalators. So now, just to give you a heads up on how we're going to run this event, I'll speak for a few minutes about the Quest for Prosperity paper, copies of which are on your chairs if you're in the room and downloadable if you're on the web. After that, we'll invite Lance to make his keynote address. Then we'll move straight into the panel discussion for about 55 minutes or so. Please save any questions for Lance until we open up for questions at the end, so that those of you in the room here and those of you on the webcast all have that opportunity to ask questions at the end after the panel discussion. We'll finish the formal part of the evening, as I said, at 7 o'clock, and we'll have drinks and nibbles downstairs from 7 to 7:30. So, just in terms of the paper itself that we're releasing today, The Quest for Prosperity: How Can New Zealand Keep Living Standards Rising for All? The paper was written by the Legatum Institute, an international think tank based in London, with input from our team here in New Zealand and in Australia. The paper examines New Zealand's prosperity. It looks at our strengths as a country It also looks at where we're performing poorly and where we're slipping behind, further behind other countries. The paper is evidence-based and data-driven. It presents the issues in a concise and hopefully readable format. It doesn't provide all the answers. It's not intended to do that. It's intended to advance the discussion and to provoke debate. I know our panellists won't agree or don't agree with all the findings in the paper, but that's fine. To give you a bit more background, each year the Legatum Foundation tracks the performance of 149 countries against the Legatum Prosperity Index. New Zealand topped the index in 2016 and in fact has been in the top 4 places in this index for the 10 years of its operation. The Legatum Institute doesn't measure prosperity by looking at GDP per head. If it did, New Zealand would rank somewhere in the 20s globally, logical for a developed but pretty small economy. GDP measures income. As we know, it doesn't measure prosperity. We've known this for a long time. As Robert Kennedy said in the 1960s, income is not an adequate measure of living standards. Senator Kennedy is certainly very eloquent in his explanation, and just to quote him, remember that this is coming from an American perspective, the GNP does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. And 50 years later, as the Legatum Institute makes clear, there are much better ways of measuring prosperity than just looking at GDP. This index measures economic and social progress against 9 pillars. Now, New Zealand performs exceedingly well against some of these pillars. For example, in relation to our business environment, the ease of doing business here, governance and personal freedom. On other measures, though, and here we have to call out education, the natural environment and health, New Zealand performs poorly relative to other developed countries. In respect of education and the environment in particular, we continue to slip further behind other comparable developed countries. For a lot of New Zealanders, we don't do very well where the rubber hits the road, when it comes to housing and education in particular. There are many Kiwis, as we know, who don't share in the nation's prosperity. As the data behind the paper confirms, inequality and the challenge of sharing prosperity across our community is a real challenge for New Zealand. Shared prosperity is critical for our economy and for our community. Inequality makes us all poorer. As President Obama said in his inauguration speech, the nation cannot prosper long when it favours only the prosperous. The success of our economy has always depended not just on the size of our GDP, but on the reach of our prosperity, on the ability to extend opportunity to every willing heart, not out of charity, but because it's the surest route to our common good. Another great statesman, Winston Churchill, had this to say, and I won't try and imitate Winston Churchill, it would go badly wrong. The inherent vice of capitalism is the unequal sharing of blessings. The inherent virtue of socialism is the equal sharing of miseries. Now, we've moved beyond this polarised view of politics in New Zealand. Most of our political parties hug the centre. But as Winston Churchill, I think, rightly highlighted, there is no silver bullet for the challenge of sharing prosperity and combating inequality. The paper suggests that inequality, particularly in access to education and to warm, dry, affordable housing and to healthcare, is interconnected. With the same low-income communities, and our Māori and Pacifica communities in particular, facing all of these challenges. The paper also suggests that technological disruption in workplaces will disproportionately hurt the same group of Kiwis. The areas that the paper highlights as needing attention are all issues that Kiwis care strongly about. In the run-up to our budget the government's budget this year, we ran a public poll asking people what they most cared about and what they most wanted addressed in the budget. The top 4 issues that people cared about were housing, healthcare, poverty and education. And it's no surprise that these feature in the Legatum paper as the areas that we as a country need to address. In a recent editorial, the New Zealand Herald issued a call to action to business leaders. The editorial was very positive about the call made by Bruce Plested, the founder and chair of Mainfreight, in Mainfreight's annual report, for businesses to get vocal about social issues. As the editorial said in the Herald, there's no reason why business figures should stick to familiar fields of tax policy or financial regulation when they feel the need to comment on issues they care about. In an election year, it would enhance the democratic process to hear more from business leaders about social issues. And we at Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand take that call to action seriously. This paper is not a one-off piece of work for us. Since 2014, we've published a series of reports under our Future Inc. brand, which examine a range of current and emerging business and social issues across New Zealand, Australia and beyond. And we know that our members who are here tonight, they work across, or you work across the corporate sector, you work in businesses large and small, you work in public practice, in the public sector and in the not-for-profit sector. You're also involved in a huge number of community initiatives. You care about prosperity and understand its importance. Releasing the paper is our call to action to politicians across the spectrum, and we will be sending the report to all the political parties, and a call to business as well and to our members to do what you can to advocate, drive change and make a difference. On that call to action, I'll now invite Dr. Lance O'Sullivan to the stage to make the keynote address. So welcome, Lance. I'll just say a few more words about you before I exit. So just to introduce Lance, Lance is the CEO and co-founder of Navaluso Medical Limited, which he's just told me is O'Sullivan spelt backwards. I thought it was a kind of Latin word that you'd picked up, so very sexy. Lance is an accomplished author, national and international speaker. He's a role model and a disruptive leader and innovator. From a young boy labelled by society as a troublemaker, this is what we've been told, Lance, Lance developed into a passionate advocate for Māori health. He's a pioneer for equal health care in his community and a champion for creating a fairer New Zealand. In 2012, Lance and his wife Tracy established Navaluso Medical, a healthcare company committed to developing innovative ways to ensure appropriate and quality healthcare reach the right people in the right place at the right time. He also founded the Moko Foundation, inspired by the opportunity that he himself has had in life. He's won a host of awards, including the Sir Peter Blake Emerging Leader Award in 2013, the Public Health Association Public Health Champion Award, also in 2013, the TVNZ Māori of the Year Award in 2013. I don't know what else he had to do that year, but other than pick up awards. And he was made the Kiwi Bank New Zealander of the Year in 2014. So please join with me again in welcoming Lance.
Kia ora tātou katoa I tēnei wae te tuatahi tikana hau mihi ana ki tō tātou kaihanga I runga roa, ko o te timatanga, ko no te whakatūtukitanga o ngā mea katoa, no reira hohono re krore ki aia. Tua rua huri ana ngā mihi kia rātou ngā tini mate ki rungi a koutou, ki rungi a mātou, ara tātou katoa no reira ngā mate haere hoki atu. E tēnei wā huri ana ngā mihi ki a koutou katoa, o tēnei hui, Nō reira tēnā koutou, mō te karanga mai, kua tae mai, nō reira tēnā koutou. Peter, Rick, huri noa kia koutou katoa, tēnā koutou katoa. Well, kia ora everyone, thank you Peter for your introduction, and thank you for the invitation to be here this evening. Yeah, it's great to be here, and I just wanted to follow on from a few of your housekeeping rules. I think the idea of saying to people if you smoke, and it's out, which you shouldn't. It's out at the place for smoking is outside. I always hate that because I reckon we shouldn't even give smokers this opportunity to realise there's a place for them. And I don't want to be offering any prejudices, but I just thought it was ironic that you followed up that with, and if there's a medical emergency, it's generally going to be the smokers, right? So, no, look, thank you for the opportunity to come here this evening and talk about prosperity. It's a concept that I'm really passionate about, which is more than just the idea of what's in our pay packet at the end of the week. I think it's reflected in this report. There's greater measures of well-being than obviously wealth, although speaking to a group of chartered accountants, I know you see that is of critical importance. But you've got quite a mix here this evening in the panel, and it's really great to be here as a part of that, representing health as a component and an element to prosperity and well-being. So it was a really interesting report. I think there's things that we're doing well, obviously, and as Peter said, there's things that we could do better on. And obviously, on the panel, we'll have opportunity to talk more about those. And some of them are critically important, obviously, things like housing and education. If we are aspiring to be a progressive and prosperous society, nation. So hopefully it's Mike, right? Mike, good on. So we're going to see how this works. So look, I want to talk to you a little bit about health as a form of disruptive technology that I'm embarking on. Tiwini's still here, isn't he, Tiwini? Yeah, kia ora, Tiwini. So my background is medicine, but I don't hold out a lot of faith and confidence and hope in the idea that my stethoscope and my prescription pad will make the true difference that I'm seeking. And so, I'm here to talk about different models of, let's see if this works, of care that allows us to, models of care that allow us to democratise care. So have people heard the term democratising healthcare? I mean, intuitively, it's about taking the power of healthcare delivery out of hands of clinicians like me, doctors and nurses, and putting it into the hands of the people. Okay, so that's democratising healthcare. Taking it out of hospitals and clinics and putting it into homes and communities and marae and school. And see, I believe we have enough in our current health system to do the job, but we're just not using it smartly. So we spend $16 billion. This is where you guys get excited, right? Spend $16 billion a year on health, and it grows at about 8.9% per annum. So we spend, on average, we're spending just under 9% more every year on health. And that's not going to get any less with our aging population, obesity, and the like. So the other thing is in GDP is, actually I'm probably going to fake this. Let's just say I think it's about 6.5% per annum increase, and there's a massive mismatch. Okay, between what we can afford and what our income is as a country. So I'm really excited about how we get new models of care that allow us to do things smarter, to provide more care to more people for less cost. Now, what's really important to me, and I was speaking with Dame Diane before, was the models that also reduce inequity. This symposium this evening is about inequality and inequity, and that's something that I went to medical school for. That was the main reason I went to medical school, and I'm really passionate about that. And things like disruptive technologies can enhance that, or there is a risk that they can actually worsen that. Okay, so democratising healthcare is very, very something I'm very excited about. I'm more excited about democratising healthcare with disruptive technologies than I think when I graduated med school. This is how exciting it is. This is the potential for the change that can occur. And so and for me, I'm really excited about disruptive technologies that allow virtual care, healthcare models to become an everyday service, an everyday place in New Zealand, because I believe it's a real game changer. And I think there's some questions on what a game changer is. And so for me, virtual care is. Now I'm going to give a bit of an example what virtual care is. So people at healthcare, you're probably wondering what it is. So let's just see if this will work. Oh, cool. So a couple of weeks ago, I was sick, and I was up on stage like this, and I had a really husky voice and a throat and a cough and all this. And I said, look, I shouldn't be here. I should actually be going to see a doctor. But that's like yesterday's news or yesterday's way of doing things, right? It's like, so I said, oh, look, what I'm going to do is I'm gonna use a bit of technology that is literally around the corner to enable me to access healthcare. So I'm going to log on to an app that was developed, and I'm going to talk to a virtual healthcare provider, like a virtual doctor or nurse. Okay, so I'm going to say, open up, Dr. Ropata. Okay.
Good morning, Lance O'Sullivan. How are you today?
Well, you've got the time of the day wrong, but I'm good. Actually, not very good. I feel a little bit sick.
I am sorry to hear that. What are your symptoms?
I've been coughing for about 2 weeks. Right?
Are you short of breath?
Yes, I am short of breath.
Are you producing any colored sputum?
Yes, I am producing coloured sputum.
What color is this?
Oh, it's kakariki.
Have you had any fevers or chills?
Yes, I have had some fevers and chills. Actually, I'm pretty hot.
Is there any pain in your chest when you breathe?
No, I don't have any pain in my chest when I breathe.
Do you have any other health problems?
No, I don't have any other health problems.
Are you allergic to any medications?
No, I'm not allergic to any medication.
I would like to know your temperature. Please hold your device to your forehead for 5 seconds.
Okay, guess it's something like this. Looks like a party trick. Okay, that's 5 seconds.
I would like to assess your heart rate and oxygen levels. Please place your device in front of your face for 5 seconds. Please hold your device to your chest for 10 seconds.
Okay, fast forward 10 seconds.
Lance, please wait while I process your case. Lance, thank you for your patience. I believe you have a chest infection and need antibiotics to treat this. I have sent a prescription to the Erden Park Pharmacy on 168 Sandringham Road, and this will be available for you in 7 minutes and 35 seconds.
Thank you, Dr. It's actually Dr. Airopata. And, okay, so...
Thank you, Lance, for the opportunity to show you how virtual health care can improve the health of Maori. You are welcome, Lance.
Oh, sorry, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so does anyone think that will happen in the next 12 months? Okay, well, it's good, you're brave. In the next 2 years? Next 5 years? So anyone thinks that it won't happen in the next 5 years? Okay, cool. Because there's already ability to do a number of those things on digital devices right now, okay? And sometimes even on your phone. The idea of having a virtual avatar thing like that is really possible, right? Now that's a real static one. So what we're doing at the moment is we're having conversations with Soul Machines, who develop Baby X, and they do massive in the area of digital avatars. And then AI platforms like IBM Watson to figure out if we can actually create an avatar, a digital doctor, okay, with AI in the background. Now, AI basically means we pull every clinical algorithm out of the in the world relevant to the health problems that we have in New Zealand, and we link it up, and we can link it with something like an avatar, and then have a patient give their symptoms, and then maybe use some digital clinical tools to actually get some more data off the patient, maybe wearables, maybe sensors in the house or on the body. So the reason why I'm so excited about this is because I actually don't believe we need more money. I've said that already. I believe we need to do things smarter. I don't believe we need a whole lot of new doctors, a whole lot of new nurses actually you know, if we had a Minister of Health in 2025 who was saying over the next 5 years we're going to have 10% less need for doctors and nurses, and by 2030 we expect that we'd be, have a X percentage reduction. I think that's something we should aspire to. Now, why that's really important is because I am looking at trying to get healthcare to people in seconds and minutes, not hours, days, or days and weeks, and that's currently how the situation sits. And that's really important for those with the greatest access issues, which are the most vulnerable and the most marginalised. And so I actually believe we can change the game in terms of equity with this disruptive technologies. But you need people like me, okay? In all humility, you need people like me to ensure that this is not something that will drive gaps wider and create better access for people that already enjoy access to care. Okay, so that's what my job is to keep everyone honest and to make sure that those that I'm really passionate about are at the front of the queue in terms of the change that I see is on the horizon, okay? So I want to give you an example of what we're doing, and so that this is not just talk, okay? So, there's some definitions around the things that I'm doing. So creativity is thinking up new things. So people have heard these definitions perhaps. Innovation is doing new things, okay? Okay, so if I was to be crude, it's about getting shit done, okay? And that's what I'm into. I'm not into spending months and years sitting in a room talking about how we can make a change. I want to make a change, and I want it to happen yesterday. And so what we're doing, just to give you an idea, is we're using these tools already, okay, to actually help vulnerable communities get access to healthcare. So we developed this app that sits in the cloud, and we put it onto an iPad, and then we put the iPads into schools or early childhood centres. And this is a really good example of one. This is an ABC. And we train up lay people to use digital tools that are really simple. If you can use Trade Me, you can use this app, right? And so we can train up this lady, Beryl, to do an assessment on children that she's worried about. And that's really good because Beryl is the best person to enable and empower to look after children that she cares about because she sees them 8 hours a day. Okay, so it's better to give her the ability and the capability to look after the health of people that are close to her rather than try and get more doctors and more clinics and more nurses and have them distant and remote to where these people are and the need is. So we could train her in an hour and a half to use some simple technologies, and then she can actually start doing health assessments. And so on this particular day at a centre that she is a centre manager for, she sees a child who has a health problem. He's a 3-year-old Māori child with a sore and swollen ankle. He has some evidence of infection on the ankle, and she uses some digital tools like a digital thermometer. She does this at 2 o'clock on the 20th of April. She takes a temperature, it's 37.9, okay? So this is quite a concerning temperature. It's not raging, but it's in the context of a 3-year-old child with a swollen ankle that has got a skin infection close to it. That is a concerning feature. So she also takes a whole lot of photos, all using the tools we've provided her with, and on an app that has the child's details registered in because this child consented, the parents consented to this child being assessed in advance. So when they turn up to their child care centre, they get an enrolment form for this program as well, iMoko. And so what she can do also is she can take a photo with showing the swelling of this child's left ankle, and then she can, just imagine she takes a video through the app as well. And she takes a video of this child trying to walk, and I don't know how well this will work. We'll try. You look turn your head to the left. Okay, so she's done all that in about 3 to 5 minutes, okay, in her childcare centre. And does anyone clinician in this room? Okay, no, good. So does anyone think this is okay and there's no problem here? Put your hand up if you think this is all good. This child's all good. All good, yeah. So everyone thinks this is a problem? Good, excellent. And does anyone want to tell me what we should do with this child? Because you're not clinical, but you think it's a problem. So what should we do with this child? Just... Pardon? Ice, yeah, it's reasonable. I mean, swelling, but it's not an injury, okay, I'll give you that clue. It's not an injury. Yeah, so it could be cellulitis. So what does cellulitis need? Antibiotics, great. So you're not doctors, you're getting to the answer real quick. What else does this child need? Some pain relief, yeah, because the child's in pain. Yep, anything else? Yeah, crutches if they could use it. Rest, yep. Blood test, yeah, it's probably a good idea. This child looks pretty sick to me. Where do you get blood tests done? Hospital. So does this child go to hospital? Yeah, the child should go to hospital. Excellent, I've proven my point. A group of accountants can actually be very capable healthcare providers. Okay? You have just proven the point that you don't need to go to medical school for 6 years and to make an accurate decision. This child, so if I showed you this and all that information, you'd say to me, what I've heard is they need antibiotics, painkillers, blood tests, and probably an hospitalisation, okay? Excellent. Well, that's what I believe, and so does the team that works in the eye health, iMoko, sorry, or My Health. We have two names, but don't worry about that. That work in a digital health call centre in Kaitaia. Okay, 7,000 children around New Zealand get access to a digital health program in their school or ECE right now, and it comes from around New Zealand, goes to Kaitaia. And there's people like you, they're not doctors or nurses, but they're looking at these cases with some training and some clinical protocols using pattern recognition and then deciding what the treatment is, and then they're sending on to a doctor like me. Okay, and now think, doctor like me who could be on a plane or watching a game of rugby in Chicago. So this is me watching the New Zealand Māori All Blacks play the US Eagles and giving them a hell of a hiding. And I'm getting cases that have gone from South Auckland into the cloud in Kaitaia. Someone's looking at it, deciding what you've decided. Child, I mean, not always they need to go to hospital. Sometimes it's just a prescription for antibiotics to go to Tuako Pharmacy. That's 3 minutes after someone's done an assessment, it's in the Kaitaia being assessed, and then another 2 minutes later, it's in Chicago being approved by a doctor, and then 2 minutes later, it's going to a pharmacy in Tuako. That takes 12 minutes tops. Fastest has been 3.5 minutes. The longest is 3.5 hours. Okay, that's what I am doing right now, just providing digital care in minutes and hours to 7,000 kids. And so this child, exactly what you said, child needed to go to hospital, gets intravenous antibiotics. So, look, I won't talk too much about the rest of it. Oh, you would have heard we opened up a virtual health clinic in Pātea. Some people have heard that, okay? Dr. Lee's crisis, woe is me. Actually, this is an opportunity for disruptive technology to prove there is ability to provide virtual care and health services in the absence of doctors. Okay, so I won't go on too much about that, other than we had some ladies train up to do that, and they did a fabulous job, have done for the last 5 weeks. So this is my last slide. Now that case of that child with the ankle problem, really concerning for me is they'd been to a doctor 1 hour before, a doctor's clinic. They saw a registered nurse, and the registered nurse gave them some ice or something and send them home, because then that's not enough, right? You guys aren't doctors and nurses, but you knew that wasn't good enough. Now, I could continue to rage and make complaints and do all this, but I'm actually over that. I'm over trying to make parts of what is a good health system, the parts that are really inefficient, incompetent, I'm over trying to make them better. What I'm going to try and do now is make them irrelevant. Okay? So disruptive technologies and disruptive styles is a major threat for incumbent providers. And I'm a pretty good guy to sort of champion disruptive styles. So, and mainly because I think these people deserve better. And I actually think we as a country deserve to be smarter with our resources, which aren't limitless and bottomless pits of money and things. So I'm excited about what disruptive technologies bring to the area of health, and in particular around inequity. So I believe that people like that, the most important person in that dynamic, in that interaction with the child, was the lady called Beryl, who's a centre manager. We enabled her to be a very competent healthcare provider, despite the fact that all she has is a first aid certificate. So this is my final slide, just to finish off. These three children, came to me one night and said, are you with the iMoko team, which is our digital health program around the country? And I said, yeah, why is that? He didn't even know who I was, okay? And I said, why is that? And he said, well, this one in the middle said, because like 3 weeks ago, I had these sores all over my legs, and I went and saw Lisa, and Lisa is a teacher aide, who we trained in an hour to use the technology, which is simple. I went and saw Lisa, and Lisa used the iMoko iPad, and I got better. Why that's really cool is that he didn't know who I was. I was just part of an invisible health workforce, which actually means I could probably do a heap more. I could scale really. I could do thousands and thousands of these kids in a day. And what else is good is he saw Lisa as his healthcare provider, just like that centre manager, Beryl. And that's cool because those people are closer to these communities than I am, and they know them better. And the final thing is he saw an iPad as more than just games and movies. He saw it as a means to access an essential service, and a service that actually is failing a lot of communities like this boy lives in. And at the end of the day, we're talking about disruptive technologies, in my opinion, that have the opportunity to reduce gaps and increase equity and equality you're talking about tonight. It's also going to increase convenience of care and speed of care and reduction in costs. And all of those things are very good regardless of where you sit in society. And the final thing to say, actually no, I won't say this because there's a panel and we've got time to talk more about that. But I hope that gives you an idea of what I do, what I'm passionate about, and the technologies I'm embracing to make an impact. Kia ora koutou katoa, and I'm sure there's no smokers that are going out anyway, so good on you.
Just go sit down the end, that'll be brilliant. Thank you, Lance, for sharing that amazing story with us. The work that you and Lisa and Beryl and even Dr. Ropata are doing is incredible. You're changing lives, and it's an absolutely game-changing way of doing it. I know the audience will have questions for you, but we'll save those to the end. I am a tax geek by background, and I was kind of hoping but not hoping that you would go into sugar tax and obesity and diabetes and all of that, but we'll save that for another day. So brilliant to hear what you're doing, and I'd now like to invite our other panellists to join me and Lance on the stage.
I'm sure we can talk about all those things.
We can talk about that, yep. So I'm joined on the stage by our three panellists who are joining me and Lance. So from the right-hand end next to Lance is Dame Diane Robertson. So Dame Diane is passionate about both social issues and about the value and usage of data. She chairs the Data Futures Partnership, which was set up by the government to develop innovative solutions to data use issues. But Dame Diane is probably best known to all of us for her 17 years as Auckland City Missioner. In that role, she managed a big team and a whole lot of volunteers as they helped feed, clothe, and support people struggling in our city. During her time as Auckland City Missioner, Diane designed the Family 100 research project and was responsible for the collation and analysis of data gathered from the participants. And that's become one of the leading authorities on families living in poverty. In 2015, Dame was appointed a Dame Companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to the community. She also chairs the Goodman Fielder Cares Foundation and is a member of the Vulnerable Children's Board. So her aim is to deliver better outcomes for New Zealanders through the development of sound policies informed by qualitative and quantitative data. So welcome, Diane. Thank you. Coming along this way is Robert McCulloch. So Robert McCulloch is the Matthew S. Abel Professor of Macroeconomics at Auckland University. He completed his PhD in economics at Oxford, before teaching and researching at Princeton, at the London School of Economics and at Imperial College London. He won the Rector's Prize for Distinguished Research Excellence and the Best Teacher's Prize at Imperial College. 3 of his papers are in the top 1% of most highly cited papers worldwide in economics. No pressure, Robert. His research focuses on the welfare state, the determinants of beliefs, political economy, corruption and well-being. So welcome, Robert. And next to me, Hinerangi Raumati. So Hinerangi has significant investment, financial management and governance experience. She's a fellow of our institute and a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit. Hinerangi works across both the Māori and Pākehā business worlds, and her current roles include, and I might have to go slowly with this one, Chair of the Paranini Ki Waitotara Inc. and Farms GP, or better known as PKW, which is the largest regional supplier of milk to Fonterra. Hinerangi is also a director of several iwi investment companies, of Auckland Council Investment Limited, of Venture Taranaki, of Crown Forestry Rental Trust, and of big fishing companies Te Ohu Kaimoana and Aotearoa Fisheries. She was CFO of Tainui Group Holdings from 2002 to 2009 and Executive Director Operations for Te Wananga o Aotearoa from 2010 to 2014. With tribal affiliations to Waikato and Ngāti Mutunga, Hinerangi has an insider's view of Māoridom's economic journey over the last 20 years. So welcome to you, Hinerangi. So as you will have heard from me and also from Lance, the report is pretty wide-ranging, and we're not going to be able to cover everything, but I encourage the panellists to take the conversation wherever they like, well, almost everywhere. They've all read the paper. There are parts of it, as I said before, that will resonate with them, and maybe other parts they don't fully agree with. We'll have a good discussion. It does cover a lot of ground. I'm going to start with a fairly broad question before we get into some detailed discussion about prosperity and inequality. We were going to talk about things like the social investment approach, the role of businesses in addressing prosperity issues, the role of data, education, the changing nature of work, disruptive technology, the environment, the list goes on. So Lance, feel free to weave in health wherever you want to. Housing is a big issue. We're going to leave that to the end. Partly because I'm very conscious that a lot of the audience are on the webcast. They're not in Auckland, and some people outside Auckland are sick of hearing about the Auckland housing market. So we will leave that one till the end. We're going to cover a lot of ground, but I'll start with this opening question. So the paper's unequivocal. It says that New Zealand has topped the Prosperity Index, but we can't afford to be complacent, and that we need to be much bolder in tackling inequality and in improving the country's competitiveness. So I'm going to ask each of the panellists in turn to name one game changer that would either help us tackle inequality or improve the country's competitiveness. So Lance has jumped the gun there. He's talked about virtual healthcare and using disruptive technology in the healthcare space. That's probably his game-changing idea. So perhaps we'll move straight on to you, Diana. One game-changing idea.
Okay, I think one of the biggest things for me is to stop these issues being political. We need to have a national strategy that's apolitical, that goes over a long period, because whilst we make progress in an area over a particular government, then we change our policies in other times. And I think we need to be a country that's informed by principles, that we're informed by principles of inclusiveness, of valuing our environment, of well-being and prosperity. And if we worked against those principles all of the time, we would probably spend less time on writing thousands of policy papers and actually doing stuff rather than talking about it.
So it's about long-term planning and not sort of ad hoc, short-term political decision-making that switches between governments, absolutely. What about you, Robert? One game-changing idea from you.
Yeah, well, I agree that New Zealand has major challenges to its prosperity. We've got very weak productivity growth. Measured in US dollars, GDP per capita in New Zealand is only around 36,000 US dollars. It's around 70,000 in countries like Norway, Switzerland, around $80,000 a year in countries like Switzerland. So these countries have tens of thousands of more dollars per person to spend on healthcare, education, to provide security in retirement. When it comes to the inequality issue, the main device nations like New Zealand use to limit inequality is the welfare state. I think our welfare state, which was set up in the 30s by Michael Joseph Savage, is coming under severe pressures. I think it's inevitable that it's not sustainable in the face of the ageing population. There are around 600,000 people, according to Statistics New Zealand, who are over the age of 65 now, and it's forecast to rise to about up to 1.5 million by the year 2060. So you're going to have to cope with around 1 million more people over the age of 65, and the majority are going to be looking largely to the state to support all of their healthcare bills, potentially from the age of 65 even into one's 80s or 90s for decades of time. And those bills are of the order of 2 to 3 times the size of the pension, which they're also going to rely on.
So all the more reason, Robert, why we need to focus on productivity?
Yes, so we don't, I think, have the productivity, we don't have the share income per person to survive paying and maintaining a world-class health system. So the game-changing plan is there needs to be a quality reform based around the welfare state. I think it should be based on principles which are not there at present. For example, each generation should pay for itself. I think people should only have to pay taxes. There should be a principle there only on income above which they need to look after and take care of many of their own needs. So there needs to be a game-changing reform of the tax system, probably zero taxes up to $50,000 of income.
I'm going to stop you there, Robert. You've had about 4 game-changing ideas already, which is brilliant. Well, that's, so the productivity, absolutely focus on productivity. Have a good hard look at the tax system, which is dear to many of the people in the room's heart. And we could have a whole hour or 2 hours on that, that's for sure. But absolutely, I think we'll take your first one, productivity, the drive there to be aspirational, to aspire to be like Switzerland, Norway, and those other European countries with that much higher productivity, and to do it in a kind of principled way. So brilliant. Hinarangi, over to you now for a game-changing idea.
It's really good that we have a diverse group. So tēnā tātou katoa, ngā nimihi nui ki koutou katoa, e te haukainga Ngāti Whātua ki o rākei tēnā koutou. I don't have a game changer as such. What I wanted to do actually with this question was acknowledge the game changer that we have actually been living through, and that for the last 20 or so years, and that has been the Treaty of Waitangi settlements process. I think that is a real game changer in this country, but it's also a real game changer globally. I think that I think we're a few generations, I'm going to say generations away from seeing the real fruit of those settlements, but I think they're the longer term game around addressing inequality, particularly in the Māori world, just around the fact that balance sheets are being rebuilt through those settlement processes.
Yeah, absolutely. Acknowledge that. That's been a real game changer to date, and long may it continue to play out. Look, we'll get into some more potentially contentious issues here. So social investment, successive governments, not just the current one, but successive governments have focused on this as a main strategy, that to address inequality and poverty, they have decided to invest heavily in the most vulnerable members of the community. And that approach, that targeted social investment approach, is underpinned by data. From an accountant's or a business perspective, it sounds logical. We understand return on investment. We understand that you have to invest now to save money over time. But I'm just interested in knowing from the panellists, who many of you are very much at the coalface of inequality and of poverty and of prosperity, sharing challenges. Is this strategy of social investment working? And are there other things that it needs to be coupled with? So maybe I could go to you first, Diane, on social investment.
Yeah, I think we have had, as we've talked about before, a welfare model that has had sort of things around universal benefits to people. And what we have seen is that actually we need to target, in particular circumstances, money to those people who are the most vulnerable or the most in need. And so it doesn't need to be universal to everybody. So social investment from that perspective is saying, let's actually use data to decide those people who are most in need and put our resources into them. And I think that's a really admirable thing to do. I think we are very much at the beginning of counting those people, and I use those people, but the groups, or deciding who the individuals are that need these services. We haven't yet really determined what the services are that will make the big difference, and we haven't yet decided what the measurement of change will be. And a lot of this is going to be 20 years out. So we may well say that treaty settlements are one of the big game changers, but you're not going to see that for 20 years. And the same if we're looking at investment of money upfront to those families and those individuals that need it the most. The return on that investment isn't going to be for probably the next generation or the generation after them.
So it's just a journey we're starting out on. It's a good journey, but we're at the very early stages. Robert, you're an economist. You like numbers and trends too.
I'm terrified you're going to cut me off.
Apologies for that.
Get to the punchline.
Sorry. So, Robert, you work with numbers, you work with trends, and you also have done a lot of work on the welfare state. Yeah. So I suppose two questions wrapped up in the same question. Governments have limited resources, so do you think social investment is the right way to go? Is the welfare state, we used to hear a lot about the welfare state, it's not really a term that we use very often these days. Do we still have it, and is it working?
Well, thanks. On the social investment approach, I'm a fan of the idea of using these kinds of, the government says it's the use of data analytics, quantitative techniques to try to work out if government funds are well spent. So one example is they're looking at children growing up in families with a single parent who's on benefits, and the idea is if you spend money on them when they're young, you can avoid a lot of future costs when they get older in terms of the welfare state, being on benefits, being in trouble with the law. So that's the idea, and the government are touting this as a kind of revolution in the way they're conducting government. I'm in favour of using these kinds of techniques. The government's talking the talk, but I'm not convinced it's walking the walk. My understanding is around up to 99% of government spending is not subject to the social investment approach. Only around 1% is. The example I gave is one of the few examples I have, because there are not many out there. So in general, it's not really doing this. Our institutions like the New Zealand Treasury have had a policy of hiring non-quantitative people now for decades. So they barely even have the capability to make these calculations. Because the government largely can't do them, they've been subcontracting them out to accounting and actuarial firms because they just simply don't have the capability. So, it's a good idea if they can bring more objectivity to it, but I'm not sure it's actually happening on the ground.
Right, so it's a good idea, but a lot of work to do by the sound of it. Hinerangi, you mentioned iwi settlements and how that's been a game changer for the last 20 years. Some people might think that iwi settlements are a form of social investment, a way for the government to kind of finance the education, health and well-being of Māori, and I don't subscribe to that view at all. I don't think that's what iwi settlements are about. They're intended to be compensation for past wrongs, and they're an investment economically, but they're not an excuse for the government not to fund the health, education and well-being of Māori. So what's your take on that? Do you come across that kind of point of view very often?
I do, but I actually agree with what you were saying. To me, treaty settlements are about correcting past wrongs, actually making compensation for assets that were taken many years ago now, and in essence took away the economic wealth of Māori. And I'm speaking generally, or try not to get too specific or too involved in the detail here. But that doesn't preclude or exclude Māori from having expectations of the government of the day, providing them with the needs and the benefits and the entitlements that every other New Zealander has. So when we see statistics which prove that inequality exists, where we see poor performance or overrepresentation by Māori in negative health statistics, negative education statistics, negative justice statistics, then we have to say to ourselves, well, why? Māori have an entitlement and a right to all of the other, or to having exactly the same quality of education that every other non-Māori gets. So we should really have the best, there should be equal outcomes for all. Treaty settlements are not going to deliver that for us. The treaty settlement process, in terms of its value, is minuscule, both in terms of the annual spend of governments, but also in terms of the compensation for the assets that were taken. Treaty settlements, to me, are a way of rebuilding balance sheets so that Māori can have control over what they have control of and can make some decisions and some longer-term investments in their people and in the way that they do things. Really, the most I guess, bang for our buck that we're going to get is actually in the institutions of government. The spend that goes through those institutions of government, their ability to make a change to the unequal outcomes that we actually have today is far more significant than what treaty settlements are going to do. Making that change, getting a Māori lens on what government does, getting a Māori behaviours, getting programs and opportunities that actually work for Māori. Yeah, we've been working on that for at least a generation. I think we've probably got a few more to go.
Ongoing challenge.
Yeah, it's the frustration levels are really high. The frustration levels are really high, and so Māori will continue to do their best to for their people in a Māori way.
Right.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Lance, so you're at the coalface and you're making huge difference, huge potential change with remote diagnostics and your virtual health care. How do you see social investment, and do you think it's a policy that's working, or?
I think it's in its infancy, and I think it's critically important. I'll give you a couple of examples why we're actually involved in the social investment program in Te Tai Tokerau called Kāinga Ora, a place-based initiative there. I was working in the Kaitaha Hospital last Friday evening, I think, and a young girl came in, a young Māori girl, and she had terrible abdominal pain. And I actually thought she had a perforated appendix, so we popped her in an ambulance, sent her to Whangarei. They ended up sending her to Starship Hospital. That was the degree of her symptoms, right? And I was trying to follow up how things were going. So I was looking on the computer, and I saw that so she's around 13, 14. She has a Jadel, which is a long-term reversible contraception, right? Implantable. So which means she's sexually active. And there were some x-rays on her face earlier in the year, March. So someone had hit her in the face. Okay, so sexually active 14-year-old Māori girl, getting x-rays early in the year. And I just all of this was like, man, this is really troubling, okay? And then I happened to be in Auckland, so I popped up to the hospital to see how things go. And it turns out that actually there's probably significant psychological things going on, and that because all the labs and everything are normal, scans are normal. So the only thing that could be explain this then is significant psychosocial problems. Okay, so I said to my wife that night, I went in just recently after I saw her. I said, like, you can map where this girl's going to end up, and we need to do something about it now. Waiting until she's 24 and got 3 kids is a nightmare, is a disaster, is the poorest outcome possible for her. For those 3 kids, she's going to have to 1 or 2 different guys, and then she'll be on a welfare. Then she'll be stuck in there, and then it's almost irreversible by the time they get to 30. So, if you were to ask me what the best thing I could have done that night was not pop her in a chopper. We needed to wrap something around her, invest resource to make sure that she gets the support she needs so she can be productive and not a significant liability to the country and to herself. We should be making sure she aspires to reach her
and that's
potential.
the theory of social investment, is intended to prevent those outcomes. But as you're all saying, it's good in theory. We've made a great start, but we've got a lot more work.
And I think the principle, the reason, the purpose of it, and the intention of it is spot on.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd say I'd agree with the comment you made, I think, which was you know, actually treaty settlements is a good example of that prototype of what social investment is about. It's recognising that the loss of economic base, the loss of, you know, mana, I guess, and the ability to sit at the front of the class and the back of the class, all those things will impact you on down your life, and actually generations down. If we don't invest in that now, and this is through rebuilding economic base and mana and all these things, then we are actually going to incur a significant liability, and in our case, 170 years.
So it's investment up front for
Yep.
a return over time, absolutely. Let's just move on from social investment to the role of businesses and how businesses can help address inequality and some of these challenges. So, Hanaranga, you're involved in a lot of businesses in different sectors. Have you got any particular ideas about how businesses can get more active, can get engaged on addressing these inequality issues?
Okay, I'll try.
Big question.
Yeah, just a little question. You know, I think there is more and more emphasis for businesses in New Zealand and in the world to actually think about the business as not just the financial aspects of the business, right? If you're a listed company today, then you are more than likely have been subjected to being assessed around your environmental practices, your social impact and practices, and as well as your governance and those sorts of criteria, particularly with regard to diversity around governance. So really, when it comes to the role of business, is actually moving quite a bit of momentum moving towards actually thinking about businesses from a holistic approach. And I know that in the Māori business world that I participate in, there is significant pressure actually to live and breathe that. One of the businesses that I chair, PKW for short, actually has taken the time to develop a framework and a measurement system for thinking about what's our impact on our people if we make this decision, either our employees or our shareholders or our stakeholders. What's the impact on the environment if we make this decision? We are dairy farmers, so our environmental impact is significant. And what's the impact on our community, as well as what's our impact on our culture? So all of the businesses that I'm involved in the Māori world actually think about those sorts of things in their investment decision making and in their practices in terms of how they manage their businesses. I have to say that we all do that in varying degrees of success. It's kind of, you know, you feel like sometimes you're at the leading edge of some of this stuff, and we all do it with varying degrees of science as well. So sometimes it's just, well, let's just take account, and sometimes it's actually let's put a framework together and get some outcomes measured. So to me, that is in fact the emphasis, and that is the way in which the world is going. And so as New Zealand businesses, that is exactly what we should be thinking about as well. To me, it also helps us with our unique brand proposition in terms of New Zealand Inc.
Absolutely. So it's a lesson that the broader mainstream businesses can pick up from Māori business in terms of the wider implications of everything they do, every decision.
That's right. And having some authenticity behind some of the brand statements we make.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One area that I'm interested in is social enterprise is increasingly playing a bigger and bigger role in our economy and in our society. So if you think about organisations like Eat My Lunch, so that's an amazing thing that Lisa King and Michael Meredith and their team are doing. But is there a risk here that we become too reliant on social enterprise to pick up the slack, and that takes kind of pressure off government and off mainstream businesses? Diane or Robert, would either of you like to comment on that? Social enterprise and...
I've got one comment that, I agree in the non-for-profit sector, it's motivated by helping issues surrounding inequality. I'm not so optimistic about the business world in countries like New Zealand. Businesses here legally, corporations are run on the American UK model of shareholders, and they demand profit maximisation. And within that kind of model, I think the scope for a lot of these kinds of socially, desirable policies, I think is very limited. My understanding of the Māori economy is that iwi trusts are more run maybe on the stakeholder model, and in Germany, in France, the boards of companies have representatives from workers, and they run more on stakeholder lines. So I'm probably more optimistic in the within the auspices of our economy that they'll look more at the
Right.
stakeholders. But within our profit-maximising corporations, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I
There's
think
going to be a great deal of
I
action.
personally think things are shifting there a bit. So we had a business forum recently, which some of the audience may have attended, which was all about purpose before profit, and there was huge interest across the business world in how you weave purpose into a profit-making entity without perhaps completely compromising your obligations to shareholders. But certainly a lot of interest in that space. But I appreciate what you're saying, and I think the lessons from Māoridom are very valuable ones. So good to hear. Let's move on. We're going to run out of time, and we've got to come up with. Yep, Lance, go off you go.
I think the reality is government, by definition, is very clumsy and a lot of times very inefficient. So government needs business with its efficiencies to, jump in and help. And so these social enterprises, like Eat My Lunch, and we're a social enterprise essentially. A social enterprise, by definition, is a profit-making company that is trying to create a commercial solution to a social problem. So that's me. Okay, so, but we can, and we can, my experience at NGO and in government agencies is that is not the place to make the impact and the difference that's required, because it is, by definition, they are quite inefficient. And so we need, this is the lovely coming together of corporate and government and NGO space, which is, bring all the assets and attributes of efficiencies, and, that might be because of a component around profit, but also a significant focus on social, and trying to the collective good that government's here to provide. So, I think there's a real opportunity with this new hybrid,
model,
I guess.
Hybrid.
And also, like you said, purpose before profit, or purpose with profit. Christopher Luxon told me about success with significance, so CEO of Air New Zealand, how does that improve the culture, productivity of businesses, and their reputation and value in the country and society and in their customers, really. So I think we should play on that more.
But all work, efficiency, government learning from business learning from social enterprise across the sectors. Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to education, which is one of the areas that's highlighted in the report as an area where we need to pull our socks up on. And there aren't any silver bullets, but our education system is quite different from the education systems that in other countries. So Switzerland comes out as the top-ranked country in the Prosperity Index in terms of education, and they have a very different education system to ours. So the German system is also very different. I've spent a few years myself in the German education system, and I know how different it is. They put a lot of focus on vocational training, a lot more focus than we do. They stream students at an early age into academic streams or vocational training, relatively early. So, there are challenges there that things that we need to do. But if I can just go to you first, Lance. It sounds like you were a bit of a lad at school, or I'm guessing that. So, what was the game changer that made you stay at school and go on to med school?
Okay, so if anyone who doesn't know my story, like the social investment, I don't want to go back and labour that too much, but the social investment program talks about if kids have 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 risk factors, their cost to the country goes from 30,000 at age 30 to 1.8 million if they have more than 4. So when I was 3, my mother took me to Mount Eden Prison to see my dad on remand. Okay, when I was, and we had alcoholism in our family, we had some family violence. We were on welfare, we were on a benefit. Domestic purposes benefit for a portion of my life. We lived in an emergency housing for a year, okay, essentially what you call emergency housing today. And I went through school and was subjected to prejudices like racism, sexism, sexism from a solo parent mother, classism from a wealthier family, and got into all this. The lad thing is, and I'm still a lad, but like a troublemaker, but I was expelled from 2 colleges, so I was the person who was going to fail and cost the country $1.8 million by the time I was 30. What actually happened was I was unique and exceptional because despite all of that and without any significant resource, I was able to turn, things changed for me. And it was really, what the treaty settlements is about recognising the mana of who I was. I went to a school where I was proud to be Māori. Up until that point, it was you were nothing to be. Being Māori was the worst possible.
So hata pētara was the
hata
game changer.
pētara. So education is like, it's critically important, but it has to be in the context of valuing the person and everything they bring from wherever they come from, but also and sort of investing. Go back to that social investment idea. It was just by chance and good luck that I was able to not be $1.8 million cost the country, but perhaps something significant in terms of offering to the country.
But education was the game changer for you.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. I mean, but education had failed me because of this one size fits all approach and not valuing who that individual was. And I'm not saying we have to be, break it down to every single different citizen, but we have to have different models, different strokes for different folks.
Different strokes for different folks, absolutely. Okay, so education. The report talks about some basic ideas like more vocational training, more trade training, raising the school leaving age. Do you think those are silver bullets or not? Dame Diane?
I don't think they're silver bullets, because I think actually there is, and if we're talking about inequality and bringing up families where children are not getting equal opportunity, and in fact we actually often talk about equal opportunity. Often there is equal opportunity, but just because you're lined up for a race and everybody's allowed to be in that race doesn't actually mean to say that we turned up with food in our stomach, shoes on our feet, been trained, have parents who pick us up and drop us off. Some of us actually enter the race way behind, and I could, my life story is probably like Lance, and I was voted the most likely to fail in my fourth form year.
Wow.
So,
They had that award?
Yeah, they did. I actually went to a reunion and they all went, wow. Wow. And I guess, a little bit of being really sort of disruptive all the time has actually been disruptive in a different way.
Yeah, in
so,
a positive,
but
constructive way.
I think I think we are lacking some really things in our, whether it doesn't matter what our model of education is, although I think there's some Scandinavian countries that have some really good stuff. What we actually need to be doing is make every child have a sense of identity and be valued. And I actually would say, if we don't have that sense of identity, we don't know. And I think a lot of us, and it's not just Maori children, I think a lot of us as New Zealanders do not know who we are. We do not have a sense of identity, and I think we need to develop that in children, and I think we should be making that every child is bilingual. And I don't say that because I think it gives you a sense of identity, but it also develops the plasticity of your brain to actually do other things, And then I'd go on saying every child should learn how to code as well.
Yeah, of course, with data.
Trilingual.
Trilingual.
Trilingual and data as well.
But, I think there's those, what are the basic premises that we have, but we end up sort of going, let's have vocational training, let's do this. They're sort of bits at the end, they're not the fundamental things about what education should do for us.
Which is about sense of identity.
Yeah.
I was in a group of 18 to 25 4-year-olds in Kaitaia who essentially have failed education and are sitting there with no job, and we're trying to inspire them to get ready for work. And, I listened to them. There were no dummies in that room, but they were failed. They had failed in education. So the question is, well, what is it that they've failed and what could we allow them to succeed in? And so, I see a lot of opportunity there rather than a lot of write-off. And we just have to try and figure out how to, find that gem within them and
individualise it and give them a sense of identity, give them a aspirational kind of goal stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's excellent in terms of education. We're going to run out of time, so we were going to cover off everything: export diversity and the environment, housing, even briefly for those of you in Auckland, and health. But we've run out of time. What I'd like to do now is go to the audience for questions. There are people with roving mics who will come to you, and if you could ask your question, and I'll endeavour to repeat it so that we make sure that the people on the webcast hear the question, and you can direct it at the whole panel or any panellist in particular. So do we have any questions in the room from the floor? I think we've got a couple back there, if we can get the mic to you.
Hi. My question is for Dr. Sullivan. Because most of us are products of our environments, I just wondered, with you and your situation, who helped you with your homework and stuff like that? Because one of the challenges for someone maybe who's not doing so well at school would be, who can they actually go to?
So just for the webcast, the question for Lance is, who helped you with your homework and helped you get you back on track?
I guess, yeah, the question is, who was the support around me to allow me to succeed? And the answer was in that point I made earlier. It was my cultural community. It was my, people that believed in me. So, I mean, certainly, obviously, your family, but, teachers that, stopped calling me a slow learner and a troublemaker and just called me a troublemaker and a fast learner. And, and so, and look, I talk to a lot of young people and tell them that, they've got to pursue the support that are obvious, the ones that they can see in front of them and the ones that they don't know. And I guess our opportunity is actually to be that support, for people that don't even expect us to support them. I'm very big on trying to help the next generation of young people come through. So it'll be family, it'll be peers, it'll be teachers and all those, and those cultural identities for me.
Cool, great. Okay, another question from the floor.
While we're waiting, I just might make a point that, whilst we're at the top of this prosperity index, that is the greatest opportunity to be complacent, and therefore the greatest risk of dropping down and turning into a society that, quite frankly, we don't want to be. And, we have Ministry of Vulnerable Children, we have Ministry for Māori Affairs, Women Affairs, Pacific Affairs. We really should have a ministry for fairness, right? Mm-hmm. This is what we're trying, this is the principles Dame Diane's talking about, was do we want a country that values fairness and inclusivity? And why don't we have agencies that are tasked with providing that? Really, those ministries I talked about earlier are about fairness for children,
absolutely.
fairness for gender equality, equity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good point, Lance. Thank you. Any other questions from the floor? What about from the webcast? Charlotte, have you got any from the webcast?
Is this working? Yep. Yes, Peter, there is a question from someone in Wellington, and it says, it is to the panel, and it says, first, Bruce Plested from Main Freight in the Herald, and now Chartered Accountants are calling for prosperity for all. Panel, do you think this is the new normal? Business calling for action on social issues and not just focusing on profit?
Sure.
I
think I answered that, didn't I?
Yes, I think you did.
I agree, and to me the new measures of business performance are about kind of taking on the financial and the environmental and the social aspects of business. We understand that we have significant impact in all of the things that we do. We're very reliant on the talent and the people that we use and employ, and so investing in those sorts of things, investing in our people, should have a significant payback for us. In the Māori world, we're very conscious of the fact that that there is an expectation about creating jobs. And so the few jobs that we do have, we'd like to think that the best Māori can get that job. But in many cases, we actually have to build that person and create and educate and help nurture that person so that they're actually ready to take on those roles. Yeah, so definitely.
Brilliant, yeah.
I don't agree with it pretty much at all.
You don't?
No, at least in my own experience, I've received very little support from the business community. I think we have very few warriors for social change amongst the sort of corporate world in New Zealand. There are a few exceptions, but in my experience the last 5 or 6 years, are the ones I've seen more interested in networking and schmoozing.
Right, okay.
I think we need a new generation from the diverse background of Auckland, of maybe younger, self-made, who have the confidence, maybe even the wealth,
yes,
and will take on the government for these game-changing, really quality reforms, and they're not afraid to maybe make a few enemies along the way, but I don't really see that.
But they're putting out a challenge,
at the
Robert,
moment.
for businesses and particularly for young business leaders. I mean, I think we've got the very good example of Bruce Plested, and there have been others who are New Zealand leading business people.
I do agree with Robert. I think a lot of our change in the way we do our businesses will in fact come from our younger entrepreneurs. They just simply have a different way of looking at the world from those of us who are.
Is Lance young or is he?
I'm not sure. You're kind of on the cusp, aren't you?
I'm going to disagree a little bit because, I've worked in a not-for-profits for 30 years, and I guess in the last 15 years, we've worked really closely with business and corporates, and I made it's been one of my philosophies is about making sure we've had much more partnerships with business and corporates. And I just constantly hear from business that they want to make a difference and they want to contribute, but actually they don't know how. And I think often we silo. And so we go, business is bad, not-for-profits are good. We're all wonderful and lovely and kind. And, business is evil. And actually it's not true. Businesses are made up of thousands of individuals, and you sit next to them at corporate functions and they've got kids who are experiencing difficulty, they've got kids with learning difficulties, they've got all of those things. And they would like individually and collectively to make a difference, but we do not give them the structure to do that.
That's right. And in those thousands of individuals in those businesses, of course, there's many of our members who are chartered accountants. They're working across not-for-profits, business, the public sector, the whole gamut of the economy. And they are, many of them, I think you'll come across, Diana, trying to make a difference and make a contribution. So I think the challenge from Robert is there that we increase that and we particularly engage young people in doing that. But I think, as Diana's saying, the will is there. There's a lot going on. Any further questions, Charlotte, from the webcast? Lance has got one.
Yeah, I'll just make a comment. Networking can wait.
Networking and schmoozing.
No, schmoozing. Look, this is an important discussion about the future of the country, right? And so if anyone's read The Spirit Level, the book, it talks about a fairer society is better for everyone. It's better for people at the higher end of income and as it is for the lower end. It's not just going to lift these people up. It's going to make, look at this bit here about New Zealand having, our worst performing, category is national security, safety and security. I mean, that's shameful, right? And you look at it, it's like it's theft, homicide.
It's not terrorism, it's road deaths. And
it's walking along the road on your own at night. Yeah. And, that's not God's own, right?
No.
And so, if we encourage corporate, and, I think one thing Hirangi said is that with a change of the guard, right, so young executives coming through that already believe they consider the environment more than the previous generations or three did. So that's more important to them now than ever. Fairness is more important to them. I think you're going to see business shifting more towards, how do we create a fairer society? Because actually it's going to be good for me, it's going to be good for my business, it's going to be good for, my kids and safety and all of these things. I mean, I think, that is what will probably change, is the sense that fairness fairness is not just about making the people at the low end, lifting them up. It's,
No.
It's, going to be good for all society. Yep.
And the report makes it very clear that it's important for the whole of the community, that we're all worse off with inequality.
Yep.
So, absolutely.
Just have to, all you guys here, just make sure you, at your executive leadership teams and senior leadership teams, you say there should be a budget for social good and, and fairness and prosperity.
Part of that budget is about getting all these people together and talking about these issues.
Don't talk about it.
No, do stuff as well. But
Do.
Yep. I'll give a plug. We do support, as many of you will know, we engage, for example, with NKMOA, the Ngākatanga Māori o Aotearoa, the Māori Accountants Network, and we support several scholarships a year for young Māori accounting students to do internships in big firms and support them financially. And that's one of the ways we're contributing back and trying to deal with these issues.
Yeah, and change is going to take radical and courageous moves and stuff. So, it's going to require, quite significant and
thank you for the challenge, Lance. Thank you. Okay, on that note, I think we've come up against time. So a huge thank you to our four panellists. Dr. Lance O'Sullivan, Dame Diane Robertson, Professor Robert McCulloch, and Hinarangi Romati. So all very busy people, all given us a huge amount of their time, and we're very, very grateful for that. So thank you very much.